Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Schiller, and I am the Executive Director with MHY Family Services. And I cannot tell you how excited and honored I am to welcome everyone to this space to celebrate the launch of MST Psychiatric for Clarion, Warren, and Forest counties. Now, the first thing you need to know about me is I grew up in Warren County. So to imagine that MST Psych, going into its third area in the state, is going into a space that's my hometown is amazing. I love that we're launching in rural counties first, simply because I'm a rural girl. It's just an awesome, awesome opportunity. So I want to first thank our hosts for this amazing space and allowing us to convene here, and really want to thank the work that's going on in the broad partnership with Clarion, Warren, and Forest counties, BHARP, OMSAS, Community Care Behavioral Health, and of course, MST Services. I would be remiss though not to also thank my amazing MHY team who is here and you'll meet throughout the day. And we have some who are with MST Services, but who also feel like they're part of MHY's team, so they get sort of that double thank you for our colleagues with MST Services. This presentation today, you're going to hear from the different counties. BHARP's going to talk about the project. You'll get to learn from the MST Services, the developers of the model, to sort of help you understand from that perspective. And then you'll also hear from our MHY team talking about referrals and process. What's also especially cool is that you will hear from a family who has experienced and worked in through the process of MST Psychiatric. And so that probably will be the highlight, and everyone knows it. So, you know, being very prepared for that awesome opportunity is well, it really will make clear why we're so committed to the model. The mental health needs of our neighbors have never been more fragile. We're seeing higher incidence of anxiety, depression, and more severe mental and behavioral issues with kids and families. We know the difficulty of securing timely care for kids and families. Kids sit in the emergency rooms, can't get into an RTF bed. You're waiting 6-7 months, maybe a year. Family-based waiting lists are long. What we're excited about is bringing an alternative to the continuum that hopefully will, one, be more timely. Two, will also reduce the need for those psychiatric bed days, whether it's hospital or residential treatment. I can't really tell you how excited we are. The one thing, I was thinking about this over the weekend. When I was in graduate school, people talked about system change. And I admit to not fully appreciating it, getting behind it, fully, you know, the examples. And it wasn't until the last couple of years when we went on the mission to make certain that we launched MST Psychiatric. Those of us in this room, part of MST Psychiatric, are changing the system. Kids' mental health will never look the same once we've introduced this program. When I think about the fork in the road, when people experience mental illness, mental challenges, anxiety, depression, there's lots of forks in the roads that happen. And the choice for families to pursue MST Psychiatric will ever change the productivity and relationships within that family and with every single individual in that family, and will have long-term benefits generationally. We've all seen generational trauma and what it looks like for families who we work with. What we know here is we're creating an intervention that will have a tsunami effect for improved health and functioning for families beyond the generation we're serving. So once again, I thank you for joining us here today. I thank you for being part of this amazing journey. I thank our partners with Warren and Forest County, Clarion, BHARP, CCBH, OMSAS, and of course, MST Services. Welcome you to the process. I hope that you will be part of our success story. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our Director for Community Services, Lucas Carruthers. Lucas?
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, I also want to sort of echo a couple of those things. We're really grateful for the partnerships and the relationships that have been established with our third development, really, of an MST psych program in Pennsylvania. So it's been really great getting to know all the different counties and the human service agencies and everybody that's been involved. It's probably been over the other teams that we've developed. It's really been one of the smoothest that I've been a part of. And so, I just really appreciate those, those conversations. I feel like it's become it starts out sort of formal when we're introducing the program, but it becomes very informal. And I think there's been a lot of good friendships that's been established as a result of that. So thank you for it being smooth, across all the different systems that have been involved with the development. I think coming back to what Lisa said around, this being launched in rural Pennsylvania. You being from there, me too. So I think that a lot of us probably in this room and those that are watching, I think there's a lot of rural Pennsylvania and a lot of this. And I think that's one of the overarching goals that we really have with these particular programs, is that they're really going to be made available and accessible to not just the areas that have the funding and some of the bigger clout in the state, but really the areas that have the most need. So I'm happy that when Clarion and Forest One sort of approached us with this, we were able to really sort of vet that out and figure out, like, look, there is really a good level of need here that would be very appropriate for this type of service. So I'm really happy about that. And also thanks to the already existing MST psychiatric teams. I mean, you guys have done a really good job of paving the way for the new development in areas like this. I mean, I think that if we shared some of the statistics from those early teams that sort of started this off, really the outcomes and results have been extraordinary. And so thanks to that group and everybody that's been involved with that. Fortunately, you'll have an opportunity to hear from a lot of the people that that are involved and contribute to those teams. And so looking forward to that and some of the examples that they have. I think one of the real hallmarks of this program have been really like the genuine partnerships that have been established through this. And so I think from our experience with the first couple of teams, we talked about building relationships, and Lisa really touched on that, building relationships. But what also occurs is throughout the process, there's ones that we've already established, but there will be many more that will be established as a result of that. The MST psychiatric program doesn't exist on its own. It really does require the contributions and the support and the involvement of many other agencies and providers and individuals. And so I think that it really truly is one of the things that we look for in this are those different connections being made, those different systems being sort of connected into this big web in these areas. So I particularly look forward to that. And also I just say there's been a lot of other agencies and individuals and different systems that have been involved in the development of this particular project. Not everybody is a recipient of the actual service in this area, but we appreciate all of the input and the feedback that you've had throughout this process, throughout this development process. And I think one of the last things that I'll finish with before I introduce the next person is I think that the anticipation that we have really for like the culture to exist is for there to be like less silos across some of the agencies and the providers, and really a lot more integration between how we work and how we function. I mean, I think that one of the things that we've learned throughout the process of being an MST psych provider is that there's a lot of room for everybody, and these different levels of care don't butt anybody out of the process that really sort of invites people into it. And so, again, I'm really looking forward to seeing how that manifests itself in this particular region, and just want to see what the impact will be with this particular program. I'll be back at the end of this to take questions and any comments or feedback. And so we'll get to that part. But right now I'm going to introduce Trisha Pizzuti. She's the mental health deputy administrator. Clarion, she's on a deserved, she deserved vacation, but she still joins us via remotely. And so, Trisha, it's definitely our pleasure to have you speak. You played a very important role in this, and so yeah, I'd like to introduce Trisha and take it away.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Lisa, and thank you to everyone who's there in person and online today. I'm Trisha Pizzuti. I'm the mental health deputy administrator, and I'm proud to be serving Clarion County in this capacity. Today, I'm standing in for Marcy Hall, our human service administrator. She wanted to be here today, but she is unable to join us today. And it is my privilege to stand in for our department today to represent us. I'd like to speak for a minute to the history of the partnership with MHY that we have in Clarion County. Although I've been in this role for just a little over 1 year, our history and partnership with MHY has gone on for the past 15 years. MHY has been providing quality, evidence-based services to some of our most vulnerable and complex pediatric cases alongside of the families who have the children in their home who are experiencing this type of situation. MHY has remained steadfast and in good standing with the county. We have an upstanding relationship with MHY, with open communication and historically positive outcomes. And as administrators, we talk among ourselves about how wonderful it is to have these positive relationships with like-minded providers. And our county collaboration with BHARP and CCBH is strong, and our goals align alongside of their goals to continue growing programs in our county to produce evidence-based positive outcomes. One of the goals that we talk about in our department was born out of an opportunity that I had to attend a conference early on where we were discussing recidivism and how can we work better together from our department throughout all departments in human services to reduce recidivism. We've been on a push for the past few years. I would say this was nationwide, statewide, and then countywide to raise an awareness of mental health in post-COVID era. This raising of awareness has truly resulted in an increase in referrals. And, I use the term unprecedented times. Everywhere we look, we're facing unprecedented times. And in the way that we have increased referrals, we need increase in services. In Clarion County, I always say, if you land here and you have the need of services, our foundation is solid because of the hard work that has been done over the years by the people who have preceded myself and even Marcy Hall in the mental health department. We have exemplary relationships with Clarion Psychiatric Center and Clarion Hospital. And it is amazing that we have the benefit to have access to both Clarion Hospital and Clarion Psychiatric Center in our rural community. We want to be, as we move forward, very responsible with the funds that we have access to. And one way that we want to do that is to increase our collaborations with our providers in a better way, also departmentally, to increase our communications and our collaborations. looking to how we decided on the targeted population and how we were gauging this service, we came to an understanding of this service during one of our provider meetings. And I remember how excited Marcy was on that first day back in October when she learned of this. And I remember that she immediately was talking to Rana Tipton about how we need this. We would love to have this conversation to get the ball rolling. We lament in our department over the supremely high-risk cases for the families who've traveled the path of numerous facets of service. Unsuccessfully, they're still unwell. And when we were learning some early details about the programming, we were so excited to hear of this program and how they are considering treating the family in its entirety in their own homes. In Clarion County, one of our goals also is to be on top of these cases so that all departments that are involved share the common goal to offer services as soon as needs are identified. We're so excited and honored to be the third of 67 counties in Pennsylvania to open with this innovative and life-changing program with these solid evidence-based outcomes available to review and consider. We anticipate that the impact of this programming will be felt throughout our community, in our school districts who come to us regularly with concerns of complex cases in the school districts. More and more children, as Lisa mentioned, are bringing the generational trauma and other concerns right up into the classroom. And we've literally linked arms. We are linking arms with our school districts. This is one place that we feel that we can get information regarding community needs and also identifying gaps in services that we can work to address. In the mental health department, we've adopted the stance of viewing Clarion County children not just as those kids or these children or those people, but we've decided that we need to embrace the theory of considering all of the children in Clarion County as our children and taking some ownership over. These are our children. So as we work together to achieve common goals, we do make our communities safer and stronger and healthier. Now I'd like to introduce Adam McNeil from Forest and Warren County, who joins us in this journey to make his community safer and stronger and healthier. Thank you.
Thanks, Trisha. Hi, everybody. I usually speak loud enough. I don't think I need a mic. So Trisha, you can also thank, and maybe give her a hand too. Thank her for helping me decide on who was going to provide the food today. So Trisha said Zach's is probably where we want to go. So we worked together on that. So I got looped in, I think a little after the initial conversations for MST Psych to be coming to the county. So it was kind of a natural flow because MHY already provides MST to Forest County in small numbers. If anybody's familiar with Forest County, pretty small population there. So in all reality, I stepped into the role of administrator in October. So I was just starting to meet new administrators at different conferences and things. So Marcy and I had connected, and I had connected with Brandon Savachka and Mike Gerard, who are Beaver and Butler County administrators. Well, as this process kept going, I mean, I'm pretty intrigued by the fact that this is focusing on, family systemic, like the approach is, long-term. It's really focusing on, seeing it through and keeping kids and families healthy. And our most difficult high-risk cases, we're looking at inpatient and we're looking at RTFs. And, just an average kid going into an RTF is, if we're paying for it, we're talking $100K, right? So, I mean, just one child at a time is $100K, for on the financial side, looking at what we're conserving, not to mention obviously, benefits to the family. So I think that the approach to the family institution is something that's pretty significant to me. And really what it's done is it's stemmed a lot of ideas coming through for me where we're going to internally within the county look at creating a model and a program that really focuses on a step down from MST Psych and starts to look at maybe the families that don't quite fit the criteria. We take an internal casework approach to these families as well. And we put a lead caseworker on them and we start identifying all the needs of the family and we start following, because if we know rural, we know urban too, but in our rural areas, it's a caste system that you're born into. You're born into this in so many different ways. So many of the traits are learned that we need to unlearn them from great grandfather and how this has all been passed down the line. So it really made me think a lot when I first started to hear about it. And I think that honestly, in our county, we will be following this on an internal social work approach as well, to really see what this model can do across the board. I can't speak enough for the outcomes. If anybody, has seen the numbers and it hasn't been, in the system for very long, I guess, we have about a year's worth of data now. But it's pretty significant when you've got 39 out of 42 or 3 cases that are successful. I mean, who has that? I also really like that it's building a provider kind of coalition in an environment where we're crossing the boundaries that we haven't always crossed. And we've got a couple other providers, Beacon Lights here from Warren County, which, they're the current provider of MST and family-based. We have other family-based providers as well, but, we see that sometimes those programs don't work. Multiple rounds of family-based, multiple rounds of regular MST. We needed a different approach. And so we really appreciate what you guys are doing. And that's about all for us, but I'm ready to go. We're ready to get moving and we're ready, we're gearing up. And as far as, identifying what our toughest families are and who is going to be willing to jump on board, So, on that, I would like to introduce Sally Walker. I've known Sally for years now, working with VHARP, and she's the current CEO there. And we'll give her a hand too. So thank you.
Thanks, Adam, and thanks to everyone that put this event together today. VHARP is really pleased as the primary contractor, not just for Forest, Warren, and Clarion counties, but 24 rural counties. We are so pleased to have evidence-based practices brought into our rural counties and to be able to develop another continuum of care to serve the families and children that we struggle with, I think, a lot, and that they struggle with our system in return. So the work that we've been doing with the counties and with Mars Home of Youth, it has been through our reinvestment programs. Ronna Tipton, our county and provider relations coordinator for Clarion County, has been the lead. She's also our lead for reinvestment. So she'll continue to support the program here locally. And we're really excited to look at the outcomes for our counties and for our families, and to look at opportunities to expand this type of program, MST Psych, an evidence-based program, across more of our rural counties. So my role in this has been minimal compared to the folks in the room, the counties, the provider, Ronna, but I'm really pleased to be here and I really appreciate you all being willing to kind of pick up and move into our rural counties and do it, because we don't have always a lot of providers willing to do that. So BHARP's looking forward to this program, and we're looking forward to supporting many more like it in the years to come for our rural counties and families. That's all I have to say. So I'm not going to take up much air today, but I am going to introduce Nicole Mundy, who is the MST Psych Supervisor for Butler County.
Hello everyone, and thank you, Sally. Like Sally said, my name is Nicole, and I'm the supervisor for the MST Psych team in Butler County. Butler had the great honor of being Pennsylvania's first MST Psych team, and I'm so thankful that I get to be a part of that team and be able to introduce MST Psych to other counties, because it really is an amazing service and amazing support to our community. I started at MHY in 2015 as an MST therapist, where I worked with cases in Beaver and Butler counties. And that's where I fell in love with MST. It was so practical, supportive, encompassing, and relevant for our families. Not only had MST proved to me that it was a beneficial service for our families, but it was also very supportive of me as a clinician. I had the support of my fellow therapists, my supervisor, my MST expert. So I always felt very confident that the interventions that were well developed and that were being implemented were what was right for the family and what the family needed to face the challenges that they were dealing with. And so this, to me, made MST feel like a very well-rounded service in my eyes. When I applied for the MST Psych supervisor position, I didn't really know what I was getting into. All I really knew was that it was rooted in MST with an overlay of psychiatric and med management built into it. I didn't know what that really looked like, but I did know that its roots and foundation was MST, and I felt very confident and sure in that. So, and I knew that that meant it was going to be relevant for our families, supportive to the families, and supportive to our therapeutic team. And that was enough for me to take the leap, and I'm so glad that I did. There are so many things that I love about MST Psych. One of those things that I love most is that it's a very well-rounded, intensive, and collaborative approach that occurs during treatment. MST at its core is a very collaborative service due to the multi-systemic approach, but MST Psych has an even higher level of intensity and depth to their collaboration due to the additional treatment members on the team. You'll learn more about that later, but to give you a little taste, there's the MST master's level therapist, a crisis caseworker, the MST expert, the MST psychiatric expert, and the supervisor, and the psychiatrist, all working together to form a very well-rounded, robust team. I've loved seeing how my team, all the different team members on my team work together, offer each other insight, offer support to the families and support to each other to create a very dramatic and sustainable change in the lives of the families we work with.
So we are going to sort of do a little interview. I had the pleasure of meeting via Zoom a couple of weeks ago after Nicole recommended her for the MST psychiatric presentation. Thank you so much for joining us today and being willing to share your story. What led you to MST?
Yes. So in about 2017, I took all three of my children to the Watson Institute for testing. The Watson Institute confirmed that one of my daughters had severe ADHD, and my other children were also given diagnosis. So we had family-based services. We had partial and inpatient. My daughter was sent to Western Psych for suicidal behavior, but was always sent home. I was out of options, to be honest. I didn't know what else to do. Nothing that we have done since, honest to God, 2011 or 12 seemed to work. We did have in-home programs where they focused on my kids one-to-one. I kept explaining my family dynamics and certain things that were going on. But still the programs didn't seem to be working. We would go right back to how things were. It wasn't until my daughter's one therapist at school told me about MST Psych, and that it was something new and that it was a team and I wouldn't have to go to different places for different things for her. So I was actually really excited about that part.
So what did you expect MST to be like?
Honestly, I thought it was going to be like every other program. I thought they would come in, just like they would, and I wasn't convinced that it would actually work. I was excited not to have to worry about the medication part of it because there was a doctor, and I was excited to like have a team. So like I was only contacting like one department, because I couldn't at this point get my daughter to take medication. So I was hoping and I was expecting that to be like the best part of it was just the medication and her taking it.
So what were the benefits to your family from MST?
At first when they came in and they started working mostly with me, I really didn't understand it, but I don't remember what happened, but there was a moment when it clicked and I realized that it all starts with me. I literally had to throw out what I thought was right and what everybody was telling me I was doing wrong with my kids and try this and try this. God, the team I had gave me so much more help with the medication. My therapist and caseworkers were absolutely amazing. They never made me feel bad. I can't begin to tell you like what they did for me and the power that they gave me. They were here when things were actually happening, or I could even call them and they could hear and gave me like real-time help. They witnessed how things were going. They supported me through everything, but they didn't just focus on my one daughter. They focused on all three of my kids and their relationship with each other. They didn't give up, even though I probably would have. They definitely cared about me and my family. They backed me up. They made me feel like it was okay to tell them the things that I did wrong that week. They helped me figure out what I should do the next time and how to fix it. So I ended up wanting to tell them more so that I could understand how I was reacting and how they were reacting. The other programs, like I said, were more one-on-one with my daughter, but she loved that. So she always did great at it. When they left and when things got bad, they would just get bad again. MST Psychiatric actually helped me address the family dynamic as well. Now I know how to talk things out with my daughter and kids. If things aren't working or if we go backwards, which we do, I have the tools now and I know how to use them. I can go out with all three of them. I'm more independent and I don't have to worry about like meltdowns or anything like that. But even if they have them, I know what to do. I know now that for sure my family was not communicating properly. Now, when that happens, I can deal with it. I can and do try to always pause and adjust and model for my kids. My kids have learned boundaries. I've learned how to give my kids choices and to give consequences that I can follow through with, no more empty threats. When I do it this way, my kids make the right choice. I learned how to definitely pick my fights, how important my body language is with them when I talk with my kids. I learned that calming myself down and presenting things a different way is definitely huge. I learned that it's okay. My family isn't like everyone else's and that I can do this. I have hope now, though I'm at a crossroads. just seeing the papers that they gave me, which I have right beside me even now, is a constant reminder of where we were when we started and how far we've come. I don't have to read it all the time to remember what worked for us and to use it. I recently did have a situation with my daughter and I didn't know how to fix it, but I knew what questions to ask, and I developed a whole plan with the teachers that I wouldn't have even realized was an issue before this program.
So what would you tell another family member referred to MST Psych?
To please give it a chance and listen to them. Put everything in, even when you're embarrassed. It makes you feel better to tell them things that you know that you're doing wrong. This time really helped me. They really like to realize how much was on my plate and that it was normal, but that I can do it. They made me realize it was okay to have bad days. I'm only human. The more I told them, the more I ended up saying, actually, like the more things I told them that I did wrong. But then it turned into the less things that I would do wrong and the more things I was doing right. But definitely telling them the truth, no matter what or how you feel.
Anything that I forgot to ask you that you'd like to tell our stakeholders?
When this team came in, I didn't realize the low point that I was at. My daughter wanted to die, and I didn't, and like I 100% didn't think that it was going to work for sure the first couple months. The therapist or the team that I had continued to say, don't worry, we will see the real things, we will be here. And they really were, and they really did. I wish that I could pay them $1 million and still have them with me today. I miss them a lot. They were in it. Therapists, I think after this, I have much more respect for what they do for these families, what they see, what they have to deal with. They worked really hard, even off hours, and they didn't give up on us. They were here with me. Because of MST Psych, I didn't have to feel like I was putting my family down because of all the things that were happening were bad. The team helped me learn how to work around the things that were going on and help my other kids when one was having a meltdown. I don't know how else to say that therapists are crucial. Getting a good team together and therapists that can communicate and work with the doctors was amazing. To have a team was amazing. For the first time ever, like I really had a team. The doctors heard the therapist heard from the doctor, the team came together. They made me feel normal, like I can do it. And I can't say enough how grateful I am for them and how much I miss Autumn and Michaela and Dr. Song.
And you did so much hard work in MST, which is why your family was successful. And so we're really grateful to have worked with you, and thank you again so much for sharing your story with us today.
Yeah, thank you guys for this program, honestly.
So without further ado, I would like to introduce our MST experts we have with us today in person. I'm so excited. We have Dr. Mark Dimitovich. He is the MST Services Expert Psychiatrist. And then we will have Melissa Golba join us after Dr. D.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy you're here, but my task is to describe to you the MST psychiatric model, to compare and contrast the psychiatric components versus a standard team, for those that are familiar with the standard team. And the other part I wanted to highlight is how the team consists of the MHY Family Services employees as clinicians, caseworker, supervisor, but also the two consultants from MST Services, which is myself as the expert psychiatrist, and Melissa Golba, if you could wave, turn around, say hi. Melissa Golba as the team clinical expert. So we both provide consultation to the team and on a regular basis interact with the team, and future slides will highlight some of those details. However, I was moved by Stephanie's inspirational story. And one part I did want to highlight though is her recurrent comments about having a team, how important it was to have a team. And that's something that MST has learned back in standard days and that we utilize, try to utilize with the psychiatric teams, is having clinical lead. And all too often, families will have multi-services. They'll have a caseworker, they'll have a probation, they'll have a life worker, they'll have a tutor, they'll have, independent living worker, and that's just for the one kid. But maybe this family has 3 youth that have high need or mental health problems or other type of areas where they need services. And often we would find that the families are just overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed and they can't meet all the demands that the services are asking. With Nicole's comments about how she fell in love with MST, I was like, when did I fall in love with MST? And I clearly remember because I was doing correctional work at an adult correctional lockup facility. And I had to drive a young man down to the MST Research Center where he was doing a psychiatric appointment with the doc. And I was just driving and sitting in the waiting room. But as I sat in the waiting room, it was a really narrow hallway, and all these research articles were posted up on the billboard. So I spent my time while this youth was in the psychiatric appointment looking at their research. And I was like, oh my God, I'm like a kid in a chocolate factory, more, and seeing the research studies and the outcome. And at that point in time, it was specifically standard, MST standard, and what they were doing with delinquent youth and youth with externalizing disorders. But then quickly after that, I learned that, hey, they're starting this new grant in Charleston, South Carolina, and they want to look at internalizing disorders, youth with depression, anxiety, other mental health problems. And luckily, I was able to join that research study. I signed on as the recruiter to recruit the families. I quickly moved into developing the crisis caseworker role because there was so much work to be done that I had to help the therapist, and I kept helping them, that they finally gave it a title. And then after about, I don't know how long it was, I eventually became a therapist. And then after that, it kind of helped me to continue to pursue mental health studies, and I became a child psychiatrist. After I became a child psychiatrist, maybe 7 years later, I started working for MST again, and I've been with them since in different consultant capacities, but MST's developed around the states, around different nations. And I did want to highlight though, I'm kind of like a local guy. I've been in Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania for 15 years. And our expert, Melissa's local. She grew up in Newcastle. And although she's in Virginia now, she has ties to MST since 2008, and initially with the Delphi, and then with MST Services as an expert, and now with psychiatric as an expert. She also has MHY ties, working with MHY in the past with standard. And I have MHY ties in the past because I was a consultant for some of the residential programs on the campus of MHY. So we're MST Services, this big satellite part, but we're actually kind of locals wed to the master plan of serving Western Pennsylvania and growing MST Psych. So I just wanted to put that out there. At that time that I saw those posters, it was just standard, but it was obvious to the MST developers that psychiatric problems was a barrier to them achieving outcomes. And it was a barrier given the symptomatology. It was a barrier that it wasn't just youth specific, because often there'd be sibling or parental psychopathology. And it was a barrier in terms of appropriate services. Often at that time, when you referred to mental health care, it was siloed and it was hard to collaborate. And the other providers would initiate interventions such as residential hospitalization that didn't match the MST plan. And there was a trend towards hospitalization back then, a lot, and long hospitalizations, right? Not 3 to 5 days. It was like 1 to 2 week hospitalizations. So the initial study was designed to meet youth in the emergency department after they've been approved for psychiatric hospitalization. And at that point in time, we'd randomize them. Nope, you do not go to the hospital, you come with us. And the other half of the group goes to the hospital. That's the usual care. And we compared and contrasted the outcomes in terms of MST's ability to take care of the safety issues at hand for that admission, and those safety issues, for future issues, and to reduce, the symptomatology for the youth and the family. So that's how MST Psychiatric began. After that study, let me see how to advance here. So that just highlights, the acuity for youth that were being at risk for hospitalization, but also at-home placement with residential. So here's the studies that followed. So the first one was in 1994 to 2000, I believe. If you have any kind of a credible evidence-based program, you want it in the university, you want it in the community, and you want others to do it. So this is a list of those studies. And at the end of all those studies, so the last one went up till 2018. If you look at the summative data, we have the outcomes of decreasing or increasing days spent in the home or community, increasing time spent in school, improving internalizing and externalizing symptoms, reducing suicidal behavior, improving family functioning, and there was a trend for reducing substance abuse and delinquency, criminal charges, and probation placements. So that, in a nutshell, is what you get with MST Psych. Those, in a general way, is what we're looking for. The inclusion criteria is similar to, well, sort of similar to standard. It's youth that are at high risk, youth that are most likely going to incur an out-of-home placement, school expulsions, but also the psychiatric component of having a severe mental health disorder. And let's see what else is in here. And not only for the youth. So it's the criteria includes siblings and caregivers if they have any type of mental health or problems related to substance use. Everybody is eligible for an assessment. Sometimes it's just a conversation and that's all it is. Sometimes it's more formal assessment. Sometimes it's a referral to a community provider. Sometimes it's our psychiatrist or our psychiatric provider for the team that's doing the assessment. The priority criteria from the counties is similar to our inclusion criteria, but with specific focus on county referrals and a specific focus on trending towards the lower age group, the 9 to 12 age group. The exclusion criteria for youth that would not be appropriate would, if no caregiver is identified, we need a caregiver to work with. Any youth that are living independently, if their primary referral behavior is sex offending, and if they have moderate or severe difficulties with social communication, social interaction, repetitive behaviors, which may capture the diagnosis of autism. So our inclusion will often, not often, but it's appropriate to refer someone who has autism level 1, and then we'll look at the clinical specifics and decide whether it's an appropriate case for admission. But autism level 2 and 3 would not be appropriate for MST psychiatric. How the model is implemented. So it's somewhat similar to standard. It's intensive. It's 24/7. It's ecological. So they're seeing youth in the home. They can see them at school. They could work with the families of friends and get collateral information, extended family. It's a community intervention. We go where it's needed. But there are some changes I'll highlight in this future slide. So how it's implemented. So the first couple of bullets talk about what I mentioned earlier, having a team, and MST Psychiatric's preference to have a clinical lead and to work with other agencies to give us that clinical lead. And basically avoid siloed treatment and over expectations of the family, too many cooks in the kitchen. It just leads to too many different opinions, alliance issues with the families when you do that. Picking the preferable or the likable cook in the kitchen instead of the one with the best recipe, all that kind of stuff could be a barrier. Often that's easily worked out at the onset, the intake. But if there's any issues along the way, feel free to collaborate, because that's how we're successful, when we collaborate. The last two bullets highlight or points I've already made in terms of focusing on engagement and having a strong client retention. I didn't actually mention that, but we have a high track record of completions compared to with a lot of other services. Substantial parental psychiatric symptoms are right up our alley. And again, we could assess, the clinical team can assess and refer to a community provider, or our psychiatrist can do the formal assessment, then refer or decide to treat. And throughout the process, we're thinking of who's going to pick up this case when we're done. We know there's a long wait list for providers. So as we develop our teams, we need to develop who are the local providers, who sees adults with psychiatric issues, who sees the youth, and keep that stuff at the forefront, not at the last minute near the end of treatment plan. In regards to the clinical modifications for MST Psychiatric, there's several slides in the future that are going to highlight that. This is highlighting one of the significant additions is having a team psychiatric provider, which is awesome. As Stephanie said, they just show up. You don't have to have a long wait list. You don't have to drive them far. We usually accommodate the setting for the family. If there's any kind of difficulties with transportation or this will be a challenge with this rural region, but I think we'll handle it quite well. Additionally, we do significant trainings in evidence-based medicine for mental health problems. That's with our therapist and our caseworker. And we do a significant focus on the intake, the initial safety planning for many of our youth. There's acute issues at the beginning of treatment with suicidality, self-injury, psychosis, other high-risk behaviors. So there's a safety plan that's developed initially, and it's monitored, throughout their stay, as we always have a high focus on safety throughout their treatment. Supervisory changes are, let me see how to sum this up. It was just a lot more work than standard. The families were taking more time. They needed more emergency calls. They needed the crisis worker to help the therapist before, compared to a standard team. So everything was boosted in terms of giving families more time, giving therapists less caseloads, giving the team more supervision time and expert time on reviewing the cases, adding the child psychiatrist on the team, and having the booster trainings focus on mental health issues, symptom identification, differential diagnoses, everything you think of in terms of the mental health world, keeping an eye on that training for the team. So those were the big additions, which are also future highlighted. Now this is a little difficult, but if you boil it down to the purple circles are new. That's what makes MST psychiatric different than MST standard. The white circles are what standard usually has. If you're adventurous, look at the bottom and see the CAM, the SAM, the TAM. These are like our adherence measures. So this is like a slide of the team organization, but also the quality assurance component. And the quality assurance component is critical. It's why a university study goes to the community and is sustained in the community, is because there's always these quality feedback loops. Everybody's always being assessed in terms of adherence to the model. The therapist is, the supervisor is, the expert is. It's all fed into this great adherence machine that pops out values that we then identify learning objectives. That's what keeps MST quality high. It's difficult to see, but that's what those bottom parts and all those arrow flow sequences are about. But if you just want to know how you guys different than standard, it's the purple circles. If you're more or not visual, but if you're more the written word versus the visual, there it is. MST psychiatric additional members are 3. The psychiatric provider, or the consultant, which is me, the psychiatric provider, and the crisis caseworker. So those are the 3 new people for the team. The roles of the expert psychiatrist, which is my role, is to work with the psychiatric provider, teach them the model, monitor adherence to the model, give advice about evidence-based treatments, work on booster trainings, work on, what the team needs are in terms of, mental status, exams, and how to, report them. Working on, the community relationships and hospital relationships, aftercare services. I bridge, help to bridge the gap between what we don't know about your community and, where helpful services can be in terms of aftercare. So a lot of my focus is on aftercare planning. I meet with the team and the expert weekly. I meet with the psychiatric provider weekly. So there's a lot of feedback from myself to the team on a weekly basis. The role of the team psychiatric provider is, first of all, be a team provider. This is not a psychiatrist where you just get your psych consult and you leave and they have their little siloed psychiatry role. They are wed to the team. There's all these feedback loops with the on-ground psychiatrist. They meet with the therapist before they meet the family. There's this whole psych consult form that's filled out by the team that's talked about with the provider before they meet the family. They're wed to the team, which is beautiful. And they understand the family. They understand the case conceptualizations. They're given advice about how to align with the family and not scare away. I don't want that psych provider because I'm not doing meds anyway. Why do I even have to see them, kind of stuff. So the team helps with that. If the psychiatric provider needs to go to the home, they can go to the home. If they need to go to the school and talk to the school about what's going on, they can talk to the school. So this is a provider who's not office-based, siloed. They're part of the team and they can do some of the ecological interventions in the community if needed. And then there's all the detailed list, which is the usual stuff a psychiatrist does. The role of the crisis caseworker, that's a little bit harder to describe, except it's anything. It's whatever the clinician needs to help understand this family. If there's an intake and there's high safety issues, they're helping assess, they're getting collateral information, they're meeting maybe with the grandma to get info, they're maybe going to the school to interview the school because the therapist is working so much with the family in the beginning. They're tracking down records, they're doing rating scales, they're doing the initial, we do like these several rating scales in the beginning. It's just like an over, like a macro level symptomatology rating scales that the families do and the youth do. So they help with that. And they're just a large part of the safety planning and this safety checks and doing house checks, and room checks for any unsafe items or things the family didn't think about in terms of risk factors for safety issues. So they're the go-to, all-encompassing, if you need help, I'm here for you kind of person. So that's the role of the crisis caseworker. So that's my discussion, a little bit about the model. Feel free to pull me aside as we eat food. I can answer some other questions. And now for a case example of how all this weaves together, our expert, Melissa Gola.
Hi, welcome. Everybody, all of you know by now, I'm also from Pennsylvania by way of Virginia for the last, I guess, 4 years, going on 5, but I'm very excited to be back in Pennsylvania. When I left Adelphi, I didn't think this was going to happen, and there's such a need in the communities that we work with. Having done standard for so long, I remember even as a supervisor, there's just an underserved population of kids and families presenting with significant psychiatric symptomology, and the access to resources just seems to tap out. And I would wonder, when the buck stops here, what's next? And one of the reasons I left Adelphi was for the opportunity to do an adaptation. So it's pretty cool to be back, and I'm really excited about some of this rural expansion. I know I'm actually staying the last day in Newcastle, and just driving through the area, realizing the need that Western Pennsylvania and North Central Pennsylvania has for access to effective resources. So thanks to everybody for the opportunity. So my task today is to breathe life into all the slides we've told you through a case presentation. And in thinking of a case, I wanted to think of a youth who really shined a light on the difference between standard and psychiatric. I think we're able to have such successful onset psychiatric teams because of the solid and adherent foundation laid before us from MST standard. So what came to mind was Sean. The youth really walked a fine line between being probably appropriate for standard, but just not quite hitting it, primarily because the youth was psychiatric referred and the community embedded surrounding him prior to the MST psychiatric team. And Nicole is the supervisor, so I might point to her a couple times, really viewed the behaviors more as antisocial or delinquent in nature when they weren't. We were seeing some pretty high externalizing behavior in the school. As a result, the youth was involved with probation. And I think the probation department just didn't know what to do. He was a younger kid than what they classically saw. All of the threats and consequences just weren't working. It was a very active caregiver who was committed to doing whatever it takes to really advocate for his son. And as a result, prior to the MST referral, Sean was at risk for RTF. And I remember, I think the best way I can kind of give life to this slide was I do their consultation on Friday. And it was Friday at 11, and we had our consultation. And I think, Nicole, you might have been on vacation that week. And there was an incident, one of maybe after 4 or 5 incidents of an externalizing behavior during an unsupervised time in a regular ed school environment. The youth engaged in some negative threatening behaviors with another peer. And the therapist had spoke with the probation officer, and the probation officer was like, this is it, I'm done. I've made the threat enough. We're going to take him to court on Tuesday. There's a court date already set up. We're going to recommend out-of-home placement and get him back on the list for an RTF. And while he's waiting for RTF, not only do we not want him home, we don't want him waiting at home. We want him waiting at a facility. So we knew sort of the clock was ticking, and immediately I had sort of prepped for this. Caitlin, I think, was covering supervision at the time, and we used the 90-minute consultation, which is another difference between standard and psych. There's an extra consultation time to really dig into the safety concerns in the cases. And I said, I think it's time to pull out the big guns. And in that case, it was Caitlin. And I said, I think we need to go and really advocate for our perspective as part of that clinical lead of why we think this youth's mental health needs will be more effectively serviced in the home, in the community, in his regular ed school, without looking at a residential treatment facility. So I'm kind of jumping into trainer mode now. This is an example of really the whole team that banded together, even prior to that Friday, to achieve success. And what we were able to do was work out an agreement with the judge where the youth was in a short-term way placed in Keystone, which actually worked to our benefit because we use that as a clinical integration time. So during that time, Dr. Song, the psychiatrist, was able to see him weekly and titrate the medication to help with some of the impulsivity and some of the other externalizing symptomology we were seeing. That myself communicated with Mark, who was also communicating with Dr. Song. The family was in constant participation. They were really empowering the youth while he was in Keystone to keep going, because we were all fearful that he would have some type of externalizing event there that would basically make the case for RTF. So we were trying to keep that warmth and attachment going. We were also had Keystone highly invested to keep the family involved, work with the youth, allow our therapists to come in, continue conversations with the youth, allow the psychiatrist in and continue medication management appointments on a weekly basis. And this therapist also was instrumental in getting the school involved to have somebody come and complete the IEP testing within that 30-day window. And since we're all in the community mental health facility arena now, we know what that timeline can look like. From the day the family requests it, they have the 45-day clock starts. We were already 7 or 8 days into the Keystone before we even scratched the surface of thinking about how do we get this IEP testing done by somebody external to us that we don't have any control over. But through collaboration, communication, and a shared desired outcome, we were able to get that done before the youth was released. So once he was released, everybody was in agreement that a regular ed environment might not be the best fit for him. And as a result, he was placed in a more appropriate educational setting that we were able to have and shape some control over. And by the end, the probation officer, even at that court hearing, was completely invested. They wanted to keep the youth in the home, in the community, not just because it's a cost savings, which we all agree it is, but we knew that if this youth got placed, what we were seeing, because he's young, 13 is pretty young, acceptable and standard, but you know, I've done standard a long time. We are kind of bread and butter. Kids are 15, 16, 17. So 13 was pretty young for us. We knew that if he goes away, that might be it. You know, that's when some of the conduct disorder stuff might start to present, where it sort of usurps being an impulsive, externalizing incident and turns over into, you have a kid who's not fitting in the community, has some peer relational issues. That's when it slips and becomes delinquent. So it was actually pretty cool to see in that moment, everything just sort of move and align. Mark and I talked, Mark was talking with Dr. Song, Caitlin was talking with Dr. Song. One of the differences with MST Psychiatric is we have regular frequency of leadership calls where we dig into the implementation of the model, including hot cases. So we're oftentimes another layer of just case review. You know, how can we more effectively meet this youth's mental health needs, keep them in the community, and if additional support is required, allow it to be short-term. And, you know, thing we love in MST standard and MST Psych 2 is MST friendly, which is really focused on empowering the caregiver as the change agent and making sure they have the skills and ability to connect to appropriate supports at discharge. So the youth getting ready for discharge now successfully. So yeah, it was kind of cool to be a part of that and just see everything work together. And, you know, I think one of the themes I'm hearing today is collaboration and integration. And standard does it. It's a little more complicated in psych just because there's so many different layers of the psychiatric component. But without that collaboration and integration, you know, we can't be successful. So yeah, I think that sums it up. And then my role also is to introduce the supervisor of the new Psych North team, Julie Regal, who I remember as a therapist because I was the expert of the team in 2017 or 19. And then moved up to be the supervisor right after I left. So
Thank you, Melissa. Hi, I've had the opportunity to interact with many of you guys. It's good to see you here. Thank you for coming out. It's funny that Melissa mentioned when I started because I accidentally stumbled into MST, partially completed an application, had never heard of MST. And when I attended the interview, my sole purpose for attending the interview was to get experience for an upcoming interview I had for a different organization. So I had no intention of standing here 4 years later. When I went into the interview, the program was explained to me actually by Tim Griffin, who was the supervisor of the team at that time. And I love that you used the phrase, I fell in love, Nicole, because on my notes I had written down, as he explained the program to me, I fell in love with MST. Once you've been bitten by that bug, forget it, there's no going elsewhere. What I heard in that meeting was that this was a service that meets the needs of people in their home and has lasting change. And so it's my honor to still be part of bringing MST to families in the community. And I know you guys want to know, how can you bring MST to families in your community? So perfect, I picked the right direction. There are three things. So these are things you want to make note of as you're looking at bringing MST Psych to your families in your community. We do have an MST Psych referral form. There is a need for a psychological evaluation with an MST Psych recommendation in it, or a written order for IBHS services. And the youth does need to have active medical assistance. You can access those documents on our MHY community service webpage, and you can submit those referrals to Lucas, his email address is there, to myself, or you can fax them to the main campus, and that number is listed also. I'd like to introduce my team. So you heard a lot of the what's behind the scenes. I'd like to introduce you to the people that will be working in the communities with your families. I have with me today Devin Porterfield. She has a master's of science in counseling psychology, actually working on her doctorate. And she's been doing MST for several years. And we are thrilled to have her expertise on the team. I have with us Elizabeth Bauer. She's new to MST. My hope is that she has fallen head over heels in love with it as well. I am excited to see the heart that she brings to working with the families that will be coming her way. And I also am pleased to introduce Philip Gear. He is our crisis caseworker. He's been over here, I've been watching him, smiling, grinning, shaking his head, nodding. He is fully invested in this already. and he is excited to hit the ground running. Some of you have already met him. He is part of a fantastic team that we've developed here, who are really aching to hit the ground running, to start working with these families and to make the change that we just heard about from a couple families. We also have Dr. Yuen Song. She's the child adolescent psychiatrist who is doing the work behind the scenes. Also will be working with the families in those med appointments, initial evaluations, those things. That's the end of what I have to say. I can't wait to talk to you guys more. But it is my pleasure to reintroduce Lucas and have him take over for you guys with questions or comments you may have.
Thanks, Jordan. Yeah, so that's the end of the formal presentation.
To go back. one.
That's the slide with like your information on it. One more. There you go.
We can keep that on there.
We'll leave it up.
Thank you.
But yeah, I'd be happy to take any questions, or if it's a question I can answer, if it's for anybody that's already spoken, they'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Yeah.
I have a list of so are there therapists, because you're just in Clarion Forest in Warren County, if the family does not live in one of those counties, they do not qualify for the service, even if they are served by a Clarion County school?
I think, the regional barriers are definitely something that right now we're working with BHARP, we're working with community care, working with OMSOS in terms of what the actual scope and the footprint of the region will be. If there's, I think one of the things we look at is what are the logistics, and so some of the different components of the MST model are really around like our therapists and our team being able to get to them within a certain amount of time. So it's actually like a component of the MST model that they have to live within a certain distance so they can respond to crisis or other different types of issues. And so when we're assembling and building the current team, it's really assembled for this particular region. Somebody that lives in Clarion, if they go to school in Clarion County or Forest or Warren County. And so I think that as we look, if it's somebody outside of that different range, we probably address that on a case-by-case basis right now, just to make sure that we have somebody that's in that area that can get to them quickly, that can respond to. Because if it's outside of that, then it starts to get outside of that model. And so, can a therapist get to them within 60 minutes or 45 minutes? And if we're talking more, if it's like 90 minutes or 120 minutes outside of that range where we're at, it's going to be outside of that model. It starts getting that gray area that we prefer not to have. The plan and the expectation is to expand our teams into different areas within, whether it's the North Central region of community care. We have some of those things sort of in place right now. And so we're looking to, create additional teams that will be further out so they can serve, areas outside of the current region here. So hopefully that answers your question. We're working on some of those things right now.
And then you said about the team having the lead. Does that mean that if there were outside services already happening, like play therapy or something like that, would those services continue, or would they have to terminate for the family to receive MST psych?
Yeah, there are some services that certainly will work pretty well and align with the MST program. There's others that are that can be what insurance companies may list as like a duplication of services. And so we'd take a pretty good look at what that was and what worked well together. As you've heard, there's a lot of collaboration that takes place. And so when a referral is made, the team would really look at that, like what are the components of that assessment would be. They'd look at who is involved. And so there would be efforts made on the team's end to really talk to those that are involved, referral source, of course, but then any other agency that may be involved to say like, hey, look, could we work together? Is there something that somebody maybe needs to maybe step down a little bit during this process and come back into it? Because of course there's a lot of services that will need to occur long term, and so that a lot of that stuff would sort of be addressed right at the beginning during that assessment phase. So it's hard to stand up here and say, well, some will and some won't. Sometimes it falls a lot in line with what the insurance would actually pay for, if it's a due to patient service.
And then you mentioned like a specific team. Does that mean that there's just that one team in Clarion County right now?
Yeah, so there's a team that will function across all those three, Clarion, Forest, and Warren County. So for every team, the makeup of that is a supervisor, 4 therapists, crisis caseworker, our provider, and then the expert and the expert psychiatrist. So each therapist could carry a caseload of they average about 4 families per therapist, and so that team, within that whole 3-county region, will likely be working with. Once it's fully ramped up and fully functional, we'll be working with about 16 or so families. So it could be 16 or so families across that whole region.
All 3 counties?
Yes.
At a time?
Yes.
I think that was it.
Good question. Yeah, well, and if no other questions, I mean, we'll shut this down, but we can start having lunch, and of course, if you're shy, you don't want to be on tape, which I imagine some may be, we'll talk. Happy to talk with you afterwards. All right, thank you.
Thank you.